Buffy. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a women's lifestyle creator on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. And I also have two podcasts. One is Recovering Perfectionist Mama, Grace in Progress, which covers a lot of psychology topics. The second one is Grace and Gavel, Where Truth Meets Compassion. It's a true crime channel. I'm an almost 18-year criminal defense attorney who has done criminal trials and dove into research topics and actually did cases in various aspects of criminal defense. And so today we're talking about, if explaining doesn't change the outcome, why do we keep doing it? If explaining yourself actually worked, you wouldn't have to keep doing it, right? So the issue is, what we are stuck with is when two people are communicating with each other, like you and I, let's say we're communicating with each other. We each have our own biases. We each have our own paradigms. We each have our own preferences and dislikes. And oftentimes, some of those may be similar. Some of those may be vastly different. So there are people generally, welcome. Today we're talking about, if explaining yourself doesn't change the outcome, why do we keep doing it? And I think part of the reason that we keep doing that is because we probably grew up in an environment or were conditioned to actually move the needle. We were conditioned to communicate. We were conditioned to explain ourselves. And so when we do things like that, like we explain ourselves almost ad nauseum to someone else, it's because we feel the need to explain. We feel like the person may misunderstand us. And oftentimes over-explaining is rooted in being misunderstood repeatedly. And so you feel like you have to over-explain to actually get, that's the only way that they're going to listen to you. So why do some of us keep explaining, even when it never changes the outcome? Because we feel compelled to, because it's our pattern. Because we feel like if we don't explain, today we're talking about, if explaining yourself doesn't change the outcome, why do we keep doing it? And I think a lot of us were conditioned to explain. We were conditioned why we did X, why we did Y, why we did Z. So to us, a lot of us feel like we have to explain ourselves because we might be misunderstood, like we often are, or people might question our motives or think that we're insincere or think that we're fake or any number of things, right? And so, but if explaining ourselves actually worked, we wouldn't have to keep doing it, would we? But yet somehow we find ourselves in this moment where over-explaining seems to hit the spot. It seems to be our pattern. It seems to be something that we do. And oftentimes it doesn't really move the needle, because when two people are communicating, they're not going to be exactly the same. They're going to have different likes. They're going to have different preferences. They're going to have different paradigms, different experiences. And so maybe some people look at over-explaining like, this person is trying to sell me something. This person is trying to trick me. This person is trying to waylay me in some way. And, maybe is being deceitful. Like, why me all this information when I just asked how their day was? They're telling me about their doctor's appointment and their mom who's sick and this and that, and you just think about all of that. And so this hit me recently. You can say something clearly, explain it calmly, even repeat it, and still get the same response, right? So people generally hear what they want to hear. People will make up their own conclusions, whether or not you said that or not. People will mishear you. People will misunderstand you. They will misinterpret your tone. They will misunderstand your motive. People are going to misunderstand you. And unfortunately, that is a human condition. We've all been misunderstood. We've all had false rumors spread about us. We've had all sorts of things go on because humans are imperfect, right? We all know that. We're imperfect. I'm imperfect, right? And so have you ever explained something multiple times and nothing changed? If you have, that ultimately means that over-explaining, people just aren't paying attention. Thank you for the like. I appreciate it. People aren't paying attention because people are thinking about other things. They're thinking about what's going on in their life. They're thinking about what you could be hiding, what you're not telling, what you should be telling, what they want to know. But oftentimes they don't really engage because they just don't engage, right? And so the core insight here is because sometimes it's not about clarity, it's about their willingness to engage in a conversation, a meeting of the minds, an opportunity to connect. And a lot of people these days aren't so much into connecting. And I think that somewhere along the way, we determined that connection was kind of a wasted experience. I tend to disagree. I think that as humans, I think that we need, hello, Moritz, Ebert. I think that a lot of us desire connection. And I think that that's a lot of the issue that we're experiencing today. We as humans were meant to connect. Hello. Meant to connect. And so that whole purpose is what we were put here for. We're meant to be a community. I can't, I'm sorry. Meant to connect. And so that can be extremely difficult when you're a person who wants to connect with others and you have a lot of people who are like, I'm fine. I have some friends. I'm good. I'm great, you know. And if they don't, they stay exactly where they are, right? So ultimately, if you're just joining, this is for anyone who keeps explaining themselves and wondering why it doesn't work. If someone wants to understand you, they ask questions, right? Because questions move things along. You have questions, you say, so where are you from? You know, all sorts of things. Where are you from? How are you doing? How's your family doing? You know, what do you do for work? You know, just kind of engaging in small talk until maybe the relationship moves to the next level, which is beyond casual, you know. But the thing I love about where I live is everyone is really kind. I was doing a campaign here. We just concluded yesterday. And it was really nice to have people who were polite and receptive. And I think that that's awesome, you know, and I'm kind of a nervous person by nature in some ways. And so I was like, oh my gosh, these people aren't going to want me on their porch handing out, you know, pamphlets for my candidate, but it all worked out. We live in a really nice area. So that's really nice to see. But if people don't really care, they stay exactly where they are. They're not going to ask questions. They're going to fill in the gaps of what you're saying. They're going to assume that you mean certain things that you may or may not mean, right? So let's talk about the pattern. Oftentimes you explain, they deflect, then you explain more, they don't move, and then you try to come back again to try to get that bridge, to reach that bridge of understanding. Sometimes the bridge of understanding is easier in some people than others. Most people generally are either communicators or not really communicators. I feel like in some ways, a lot of communication has stalled in some ways because people just don't want to do it. They look at it as a chore. I like to meet new people. I have people that I don't even know sometimes approach me and want to talk to me about an issue that they have just because, I don't know, I guess maybe I have a friendly face. I don't know. But it's one of those things where I try to acknowledge everyone because ultimately there are a lot of people struggling. There are a lot of people suffering, and we never know what someone else is going through. You know, so if we can be that person to say, hey, how you doing? I hope you have a good day. Or I'm sorry to hear that your dog is sick. Or I'm sorry to hear about your husband, or any number of things. That can make a huge difference. That little bit of care that doesn't cost you a dime can literally shift someone's day. That can make them feel seen. That can make them feel heard. That can make them feel important, like they matter. Because a lot of people don't feel like they matter these days. And I think that's extremely sad. You know, I mean, you look at everything going on and just people just struggling and trying to build a community. And communities aren't always easy to build, you know? When did you realize explaining wasn't changing anything? Anyone want to weigh in? Feel free. Because at some point, you stop asking yourself, did I say it wrong? Because oftentimes when our message isn't hitting, we're trying to figure out an explanation. And most of us go inward. What did I do wrong? Was my tone wrong? Was my facial expression wrong? What was wrong with me that didn't work out in this scenario? Could someone else have done it better? Right? And we're not thinking about the other person. We're thinking about what we did that was wrong, what we could do to improve. And start asking again, why am I saying it again? You're saying it again because you hope that there will be some renewed interest. You're trying to communicate. But guess what? One person cannot communicate on their own. They need a back and forth volley. That's what communication is. Communication is bridging gaps, building alliances, having conversation with people. You can't force understanding, and you can't explain someone into willingness. Clarity doesn't fix unwillingness. Only the person who is unwilling is able to fix what they need to fix. You're not explaining because you're unclear. You're explaining because you care. You're explaining because you want to build a bridge of communication. Maybe you're a communicator. Maybe the other person isn't. But caring doesn't mean you have to keep proving your point. What changed when you stopped explaining? Essentially, it's almost like you stopped having to prove yourself. And ultimately, if you are comfortable proving yourself and you are comfortable over explaining and having to deal with that, that's one thing. That's your choice. But ultimately, this is kind of a follow-up to what we talked about. If explaining yourself worked, you wouldn't have to keep doing it, right? And so the next thing that we're going to talk about is talk about is the moment you stop explaining yourself, everything changes. There's a moment where you stop explaining yourself and everything changes. Not because other people change, but because you do, right? You have learned that over-explaining doesn't work. And so you have decided that you are going to stop over-explaining. If you've ever been stuck in that loop, explaining, re-explaining, trying to be understood, you know how exhausting it is. You know how frustrating it is. You know how difficult it is to continue a conversation with someone who's not listening to you, who doesn't have any intention of listening or making a connection, right? Has anyone ever reached the point where you just stopped explaining because you're like, it's a waste of my time, right? Let's talk about the shift here. The moment you stop explaining, you start observing. You see who asks questions and who doesn't. So you know who is invested and who is just there to just get through it, right? And it can be extremely difficult when you are a person who likes to build connections and you are a person who likes connection, having someone who literally is there just to take up some time, right? If you're just joining, this is about what changes when you stop trying to explain yourself to everyone. And guess what? You don't have to explain yourself to anyone. It's your decision and your discretion as to who you want to explain yourself to, right? Some people are going to care. Some people are not going to care. So what changes? You stop over preparing, because if you're anything like me, and I know some of you may be, some of you may not be, you actually prepare for conversations. You think about what you're going to go into. You think about how you're going to talk about things, and you look at what main points are important, right? You stop defending every single detail, because ultimately, as overthinkers, over-explainers, anxious people, we all have all of these things that we're trying to deal with. And you stop chasing agreement. Not everyone is going to agree with you, and that's okay. You don't need 100% agreement, right? And you start paying attention to behavior instead of words. What did you notice about people when you stopped explaining? Some people lean in when you stop explaining, and some people don't like it, right? They're not analyzing your tone. They're not rewriting your intentions. They just know you. Overthinking and over-explaining can make you feel like you have something to prove, but you don't, unless you want to. What changed for you when you stopped explaining everything? You don't owe anyone an explanation unless you choose to give one, and that is in your court. You can know who you are without proving it to anyone else. Because when you stop explaining, you stop giving people something to push against. You don't need to prove who you are to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. That's not your job. That is not your job. You have no obligation to prove who you are to people that you were just meeting and you were just talking to. It's not their business as to your family situation. It's not their business to how much money you make, any number of things. You decide what you want to share. You decide what you don't want to share, because that is your story and your prerogative. It belongs to you, right? And so ultimately we learn that there's a moment when you need to stop explaining yourself. And then everything seems to change, right? Not because other people change, but because you do. You don't feel like you're on the hot seat. You don't feel like you have to justify every single thing you do, right? Because you don't. You don't owe anyone an explanation unless you want to give it, right? If you've ever felt stuck in that loop of explaining, over-explaining, explaining, over-explaining, re-explaining, trying to be understood, you know how exhausting it can get. Has anyone ever reached the point where they're like, I'm not explaining anymore. I don't owe anyone an explanation. I'm going to do me and I'm going to be fine. The moment you stop explaining, you start observing. You start looking at their intentions. You start looking at their body language, their tone, whether they cross their arms. Like, what exactly are they doing? Are they invested or are they bored? Like, which one is it? If you're just joining, this is about what changes when you stop trying to explain yourself to everyone, because not everyone deserves a seat at your table. I hate to say that, but there are people that are not wanting to be invested and they don't want to be invested. So you stop over preparing, you stop defending every detail, and you stop chasing agreement, because not everyone has to agree with you. And that's okay. We're all going to have differing viewpoints. We're all different people. And you start paying attention to behavior instead of words. Some people lean in when you stop explaining, and some people don't like it, especially those that want to know everything. Because when you stop explaining, you stop giving people something to push against. You don't need to prove who you are to people committed to misunderstanding you. You can still be kind. You can still be clear. You don't have to keep proving it. So I just want to say thank you all for tuning in, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope you'll come back and see me again soon, as I tend to go live at 12:30 p.m. Eastern on TikTok Live. So, YouTube Live, I do noon Eastern on TikTok Live and then 12:30 Eastern on TikTok Live. I'm getting ready to head to Instagram now. So just want to say thank you all very much, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks for tuning in. It means a lot to me. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.